Dragon Ball Super episode 53 aired today, and it was a fun episode. There was a lot of lore building and a lot of stuff that kind of went answered and a lot of stuff that kind of went unanswered. So we're going to try to break it down and digest it here today. So for today's video, I'm going to start off talking about the subplot, the whole Trunks stuff and the Pilaf gang, the 18 stuff. It's always nice to see 18, by the way. I'm going to talk about that first, and then I'm going to jump into the main meat of this episode. So basically, you've got the plot going on where Bulma's still working on the time machine, and you've got the Pilaf gang there, and you've got Mai spying on future Trunks. She's still totally enamored with him, and they run a scenario where she has to give Shu a band-aid because he quote unquote scraped his knee or whatever. And, older Trunks is totally oblivious to it. But you have Kid Trunks coming in, shimmying. Hey, baby, I like what you did there. What that mouth do? No, he was just totally on her, and she's just blushing. She doesn't know what to do. She can't handle this Trunks overload. She just self-combusts and leaves. And, aside from that, the 18 stuff, it was nice to see 18. We see Krillin and Trunks talking about Gohan. He's like, hey, Pan was cute, wasn't she? And Trunks agrees. And he's like, oh, I'm married too, by the way, and I have a daughter. And Trunks is like, oh, well, who is it? And then 18 shows up with Merit, and he's totally in shock. He's like, oh, it's you. And she just kind of walks up to him, puts her hand on his chest, or her fist, on his chest, and she's like, oh, I heard that you killed the other me in your timeline. You owe me money for that. Like only 18 would. And Trunks is like, he's totally in shock. But he kind of lets it go really quickly when he sees 18, Marin, and Krillin basically kind of conjured up like a family there, just kind of standing together, and he just kind of is enamored with that. He really loves the peacefulness that really has taken place in that timeline in contrast to his. He loves that 18 is a parent, apparently. And then he goes off to find his parent, and then we get into all that Mai stuff I talked about initially. So, getting into the meat of the episode. Everything else in this episode is basically around Goku, Whis, Beerus, and Zamasu, and Gowasu, I believe his name was. Basically what happens is those three head over to Universe 10's Kaioshin realm. I don't know whether or not this is a realm specifically for Kaioshin and training, or if this is the equivalent to Universe 7's Kaioshin realm. They don't really elaborate, but I think it's the latter because the title of the episode, etc., etc. It sounds like it's the same place that Kibito and Supreme Kai would be on in Universe 7. So they come over here and they see Zamasu, and Zamasu is there, and I'm going to try to recant a lot of the drop lines in the dialogue as well as I can. So essentially what happens is initially before they show up, Zamasu is sitting there with his mentor. I'm just going to call him Gowasu. Forgive me if I'm mistaken. He's sitting there with him and he's pouring him some tea. And Gowasu says, it's good that you can make tea like this. The fact that you can do this shows that you're pure of heart. And that was interesting to me. I didn't catch that my first run through. I actually had to watch the episode a second time because I watched it initially early in the morning and I was like, oh, great. I don't remember now. It's like super late. So I had to watch it again. I didn't catch that. I think that was very interesting that he said he was pure of heart. I don't think he meant that literally, that you had to be pure of heart to make that tea, but I think he just kind of sensed that he was pure of heart. And at that point, that's when they start talking about the duties of the Kaioshin, and basically Zamasu's like, hey, are we really supposed to be protecting these humans? They start all these problems, all these wars, all these issues. He's basically talking like Black did in that episode a couple episodes back where he fought Trunks in the future timeline, basically, for a brief moment. And Gowasu says, it's not your job, basically, to paraphrase. He says, it's not your job to question them. You're here to protect them and to learn from them and stuff like that. And he says, we are the gods of creation. And a lot of people don't really know that, but the Supreme Kais, the Kais in general, are the gods of creation. No. The Supreme Kais are the Kaioshin. They don't really elaborate too much on what the Kaios are, like the Kaiosamas, which would be King Kai and his equivalents. But he said the Supreme Kais are the gods of destruction, of creation. And the only one that's allowed to destroy is the gods of destruction. And right as he says this, Beerus, Whis, and Goku show up on the planet. Immediately upon arriving, Zamasu notices that there's a human there, and obviously it's Goku. Goku runs up to him like only Goku would, and we have a funny little moment with Goku introducing himself. He said something, but he totally said it incorrectly, and we called him stiff. I forget what the line was. And he begs to fight him, and he's declined by Zamasu. I want to point out here that Zamasu refers to Goku as a human in this episode. That's totally fine because the word ningen, from my understanding, somebody correct me if you're proficient with Japanese, but from my understanding, it means basically a mortal for one, or somebody that inhabits Earth. I believe it's more so the mortal. So that doesn't mean, it doesn't matter that he's a Saiyan or whatever the case is. He's still a Earthling, or a human, excuse me. I think Earthling is the different terminology that would imply that you're like Krillin, Tien, and all those guys, while Goku wouldn't be an Earthling. I believe that's how it works. Like I said, if you're familiar with it, correct me. I'm totally open to that. And one thing I wanted to clarify really quick is that Zamasu was a Kaio. So he was the equivalent to King Kai. And he was so prodigious and he was so good that they basically are going to give him the role of the Supreme Kai of Universe 10, I'm presuming. So I just wanted to clarify that really quickly. He's in training for that position. Now, moving on, Beerus and Whis explain that there is a time ring on the loose, and they explain about Black and all that stuff. And they ask for confirmation that they still have the time rings. I don't know if that's where they're held in that universe or whatever the case is. This is why it all kind of gets all over the place. Maybe they went to Universe 10 to look at their time rings specifically because Zamasu was there and they were investigating Zamasu. But that leads me to my next point. When they see that the rings are there, and Gowasu says, well, if you guys are having this issue in Universe 7, why did you come all the way to Universe 10? I don't know if this was a lie or whatever the case is, but we said they were just jumping from all the universes. Maybe he said that just to not seem suspicious or whatever the case was, because he never said anything about going to the other universes. If they do that, that would be cool, but I really don't think that's going to happen. But moving on from there, Goku is continuing to beg, and Gowasu tells Zamasu to actually fight him. So it's part of his training. He wants him to see and experience humans, obviously, so he can have a more positive outlook on them. And at this point, they begin sparring. And I think the choreography was really nice, to be honest. The animation was spotty and the fight scene, but it's just like, it's whatever. I don't care at this point. But throughout the fight, there was a moment in there where Zamasu kind of powers up. And for a brief instance, they feel that same or similar type of ki. And Beerus asks Whis if he felt it, and Whis confirms. And Goku even thinks to himself, what was that? That was Goku Black's ki. That's Black's ki. So that's interesting. This is where we're starting to get into the Zamasu is Black thing. I'm not going to talk about that a whole lot here. Real to Real and I actually recorded a video earlier today. It should go up probably tomorrow or the day after, where I talk about that with him. Just basically theorizing a little bit, talking about it with information from this episode. So they fight a bit more, and Goku is basically overpowering him in a Super Saiyan 2 state. This is another thing that's kind of inconsistent because these guys are not supposed to be using Super Saiyan 2 anymore, but whatever, I don't care. He's overpowering him, and Zamasu's totally in shock. He's like, I didn't know humans could be this strong. Gowasu is in shock, all this stuff. One thing I want to say that's pretty funny was before the fight started, he was like, Gowasu was like, be sure to hold back. And Goku was like, what? No. That was hilarious. Like, Mosako did a great job. I'm actually interested for once, to see how Sean does that, because that would be interesting. I typically prefer Mosako. She's just really good. She was really good in this episode, by the way. Moving on from that, the fight is over. Long story short, these guys dip out and they have some dialogue on their way back. They say that all this stuff kind of points to Zamasu being Black, but there are still several mysteries. Goku said that the ki felt similar, but it wasn't the same. So he's still got a lot to kind of figure out. They're kind of jerking us around. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about too much here, but the obvious answer would be that Zamasu is the same character as Black, maybe from the future or whatever the case is. We'll talk about that in that video. It also seems like Zamasu would be that white-haired villain if he is Black that Toriyama kind of alluded to a while ago, especially if that concept art that Bandai was selling of Black Goku is actually 100% legit. And Zamasu, if Black has like a pinkish transformation, whatever the case is, that basically immediately knocks him out of the list. So we'll see how this all works out. Let me know what your favorite part of the episode was. Subscribe if you're new, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace out.